Welcome, everyone, and welcome to today's BAARN class, Artist Readiness 101. We'll give people just 1 minute to finish logging on and we'll get started. Well, it's great to be with you all today. Again, welcome. I'm Molly Quinlan Hayes, Executive Director of NCAPER, the National Coalition for Arts Preparedness and Emergency Response. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Annalisa.
Hi everyone, my name is Annalisa Escovedo and I'm the local coordinator. I live in San Francisco. I'm also a practicing artist and soon to be mom.
Right. Our other team member who you will meet in future classes is Tom Clareson. He is the project director for BAARN, which is a program of NCAPER. He also serves as the senior consultant for digital and preservation services at Lyrasis. We are recording today's webinar, so it will be available 24/7 following today. Annalisa?
You, Molly. And before I forget, please use the Q&A if you have any questions, because at the towards the end we'll have a moment where we can respond to any questions and read out any comments. So please utilize that. Um, right here. What is Barnes? Bay Area Artist Readiness Network. It's a network designed specifically for artists and cultural organizations. And I have a list here, what we provide: free preparedness training, practical tools and resources, peer and emergency support networks, readiness grants, technical assistance, and real world case studies and learn lessons. When we talk about readiness, we're talking about being prepared before a crisis happens, not scrambling afterwards, whether the challenge is wildfire, floods, thefts, cyber attacks, closures. I'm sure I'm hitting some things that we think about when it comes to disaster or even a personal emergency. Barnes is here to help artists build the skills and relationships and systems they need to navigate. Why Barnes? Why does readiness matter? Here you'll see the list of what, again, those what artists face, the increased risk, and also the cost of being unprepared. Some of these we know, some of these we recognize. If you are an artist and you ask yourself, what will happen if my studio flooded tomorrow? What if my laptop died? You lost 10 years of work. Let's just say that. We all experienced this during the pandemic. What is your biggest annual event was canceled for 3 days before opening. Artists already manage risk every day. They just don't always think about it as readiness. Preparedness, readiness isn't about expecting a disaster. It's about protecting what you work so hard to build. Next slide. How does Barnes build readiness and how does it help? Learn, plan, connect, act, recover. We all hope you will participate in as many elements of the program as you're able to today, since we want to help you build an internal habit, external connections to make you safer and more resilient. The goal isn't about to create a 100-page emergency plan, that one binder, that lives in the back. The goal is to make preparedness part of your normal creative practice. Just like artists develop routines around their creative work, Barnes will help you develop the routines and around protecting your work. Readiness is not just one activity, it's practice. With that, just like when a disaster hits, we all call up our friends, our family. We reach out to community. Barnes itself has support as well. We currently are supported by the Hewlett Foundation. But as well, here's a list of our advisory committee. Individuals, they're connected with other organizations as you see, and they're all local here in the Bay Area. I thought about this. The network needs a network. And just like us, like we need family and family needs family, and we need our communities and communities. So we also practice that.
So just to provide a little bit of context, NCAPER, the parent organization, is a voluntary task force of national, regional, state, and local partners. We are celebrating our 20th anniversary. We were created back in 2006 in the wake of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, after several leaders in the arts and philanthropy community realized that so many artists and nonprofit arts organizations just fell through gaps in the infrastructure and the support system after those disasters. And so since then, we have been working nationally throughout the field to help to fill some of those gaps and to build a better safety net through the arts, for the arts.
And here's just a little shot. If you go to End Capers, you will find BAARN's webpage. Um, f- Again, we're going to feature classes, future classes, grants, anything that you want to read all about us. We're on the End Capers website, and you can navigate into the BAARN's website. Thank you. So part of our work is also research. We've been doing a lot of surveys and learning and also listening sessions. We have actually three coming up in July, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Solano County. If you go to our website, sign up for the mailing list, you can learn all about that and be part of that. But right here, you'll see our Barnes classes that we have coming up. Because one thing we've heard over and over that artists are busy. Many people can't commit to lengthy training. So we have here available free classes, and they're going to be primarily online, like this one, and they're going to be available to you even after. And just to mention, right now we are going to be launching more classes. We're going to be offering approximately two classes each month. And we also have two tracks, the basic and the enhanced track. The basic covers preparedness concepts that everyone ideally should know or sound familiar, regardless of discipline. And then the enhanced track dives deeper into more like the specialized, more relevant to your practice, venues, events. So here's some of the topics like art readiness 101. This is a basic. And then it goes into risk assessment. And then the next one is also going to be more of the guided tour, emergency business continuity planning, emergency response. So today we'll be focusing this class on planning for individual artists and small artist-run organizations where there may be significant differences for nonprofits art organizations. We'll kind of highlight this throughout the presentation. Everything we share here is information for you to consider and weigh. Nothing is hard, nothing is a fast rule. Take what is useful and what you can implement given the resources.
Great. So we'll start with just setting the stage with some common definitions. Again, these are not hard and fast either, but give us kind of some shared jargon. When we are talking in the BAARN context about readiness planning, we're really looking across the whole continuum of the types of interruptions and disruptions that can occur. So often and in our listening tour, we asked artists in the Bay Area to help us with some of these definitions. So these are some of the common themes that emerged. Emergencies, people tend to define those as a singular event, kind of smaller scale, typically something with a beginning, middle, and end, and something that can resolve fairly quickly. A crisis is typically something that has more significance and where there's kind of a fork in the road. You need to make a very quick decision about in which direction you're going to move because of the environment or the emergency that has occurred. And a disaster, I think we all can agree that typically brings to mind something that is large scale, might affect an entire region or city, and often will cut off basic services, infrastructure, communications, and often typically requires some sort of official governmental response, whether that's at the city, state, or federal level. And when we're talking about types of disruptions and crises, of course, natural disasters come to mind, storms, earthquakes, floods, but also biological agents, public health emergencies. We all experience the impact of the pandemic, wildfires and structural fires. But we're not limited to naturally occurring events. We also have a growing number of human-made and human-caused events, whether those are intentional things like vandalism, arson, or violence or theft. Also, social activities such as civil unrest, but also accidents, whether those are industrial accidents, transportation situations, and then building failures. The failure, often we're working in aging structures and buildings. And so we have deferred maintenance and things that can lead to building failures and systems problems. We also are so reliant on technology that these are high risks for us, whether those are power surges, equipment failure, whether hardware or software, the loss of data, data crashes, security breaches, internet outages. Any of these is likely to cause us real hassles and losses in our work. And then a fairly new category of crisis that we have termed administrative disasters, but that seem to be impacting particularly artists across the country and in the Bay Area, but things like sudden funding changes or cuts, socio-political shifts, the need for succession planning, particularly when there's a sudden loss of a key person, reputational disasters, whether they're warranted or not, but some sort of crisis in the public eye, event and tour cancellations, and artwork being lost or stolen, whether because of a theft or an accident. So all of these can happen to really anyone in any line of business, but we also know that those of us working in artistic practices have very specific risks that are somewhat unique and need to be kept in mind as we look at our planning and our prioritizing. So we are often working on very tight financial margins. Some of us may be operating with only one or two primary streams of revenue. And so that puts us at risk if one of those is interrupted or cut off. Many of us are wearing multiple hats because we're in one person or small team operations. So we're always having to balance our competing responsibilities and priorities. We also are, whether we are a creator or running an arts organization, we have this very unique responsibility to care for the work that we make or produce or present or conserve. So that stewardship obligation that we have. And then this tension that we hear about so often, which is we got into this because we want to create or we want to share art with the public. But then there are all of the administrative and bureaucratic pieces that we have to handle as well. So how do we make time for both of those in a healthy way, in a responsible way? So just a couple of other definitions. This is a graphic of the disaster management cycle. This is literally a cycle that those who work in emergency management use every day. And it kind of breaks out an event into these four quadrants. You start at 12 o'clock, which is when an event of any kind happens, a disruption or interruption or emergency. You move into the response phase, which is the immediate kind of protecting people and things. Then moving into recovery, which is restarting, rebuilding, getting back to normal operations. Mitigation, that quadrant is really about, okay, how can we lessen our risk for next time? How can we fix some of the gaps, fix some of the flaws, and build in some protections? And then preparedness is really what did we learn from all of that? And how can we look at our overall operations so that if there are things we can't mitigate for, if there are things we can't plan for, we can still have a sense of, okay, we're going to be prepared. So no matter what happens the next time, we're able to put our plan B into place. We've thought about how we're going to keep things going if something is interrupted unexpectedly. So this is a never-ending cycle. They all feed into each other. They're not necessarily this neat and tidy. There's often overlap. But one thing that we'd like to say here is that um, whether you are staff or board of an arts organization or in an independent practice or working within a small artist ensemble or collective, you actually have agency in all of these quadrants. And that's one thing that we hope that this set of BAARN classes and resources will help to provide is giving you the tools and resources so that you can be active and healthy in all of these areas. As an example, in the mitigation phase, fixing physical problems in your facility or studio before they get to a point of danger, making sure that your important records and materials are at least 3 inches off the floor in case there's a flood and you want to avoid water damage. Making sure your insurance is up to date and that you have a current inventory and you understand and valuation of all of your assets. So those are all things that you can do in the mitigation space. In preparedness, these can be simple things like having a go bag. If you do suddenly have to evacuate or leave your space, what are the priority items that you're going to take with you? Do you have a battle buddy? Do you have someone who can help step in if suddenly you are out of commission? Do you know alternative places where you would be able to do your work if suddenly your workspace or facility is unavailable? All of those fit into that idea of preparedness. In the response phase, making sure that you know how you and your people are safe and able to get help. Do you have fire drills? Do you know how to evacuate? Do you know where you're going to meet up? Um, do you know how to make repairs and salvage items so if suddenly they're damaged, you can get them out safely and help to conserve and save them? How do you contact your network if suddenly your typical communications are cut off? Those are all activities that we can take on in the response space. And finally, in recovery, these are things like advocating for assistance if you need it. Artists are the most resilient people we know. They often want to be the helper. It's very hard for artists to ask for help. But there is help out there, but you need to be comfortable advocating for yourself or for those around you. Providing support to your community. After disaster, we know many are moved to provide community activities, whether that is for connection or for healing or even just providing a space for people to gather. Those are very natural things in our community. So that's just a smattering of some of the ways that we can be active and healthy in all phases of a disaster. So, Annalisa.
Yeah. And with that being active, one way is planning matters. Readiness matters. When an emergency happens, we can assume that we're going to make a good decision at that moment, or our brain is even designed in that way. And sometimes we're not thinking clearly. So fight, freeze. But I think we recognize one of them, fight and flight. That's the one that we're most familiar. But what is freeze? Freeze can look like we're paralyzed or there's no action, um, or denial, or waiting for more information, looking for someone else on what to do. The challenge is that the person you're waiting may not be there. We don't know who they are, maybe. Research shows that people who respond effectively during emergencies, such as firefighters, nurses, emergency responders, military personnel, aren't fearless. It's a set of them apart is they practice these events. They practice being in a situation. So through training and repetition, they built a mental framework on how to respond to under stress. Most of us don't experience emergencies regularly. They are unfamiliar to us, unfamiliar situations. And because they're unfamiliar, we often don't have the mental script for what to do next. That's why planning matters. Readiness plan creates that script before you need it. The training, the exercises, drills, incorporate it into a plan that can be actionable, can help reduce that hesitation, improve decision making, increase the likelihood that you'll take the right steps when it's time. And again, the goal isn't to have that predicted every possible scenario emergency. The goal is to make fewer decisions during emergencies because you already made the most important one beforehand. It's just thinking ahead. So the secret is there's no secret. Um, Readiness is not about becoming someone else or creating the perfect emergency plan, because when an emergency happens, it's also not perfect either. It starts with the skills that artists already have, as Molly noted. We're creative individuals. We adapt, we problem solve, we're resourceful, and we work with community. So community care is at its core. The plan should be specific to you, a painter, performer, a venue, a teaching artist. Many all need different plans. We'll start by identifying risks and looking at their impact and prioritizing what needs attention first. Then build from there. Emergency contacts, backup plans, biggest priorities. Eventually, you'll complete a readiness plan by that. The goal is not perfection. The goal is having something practical, visible, useful, a tangible plan for you. All right, I want to take a couple minutes. You could use and I'll read it out loud if you could use that Q&A to just respond in in that little chat box. Please list any skills or resources you could think of that have applied in a situation. Um, It could be anything that you've used that if you, like as we were talking that came to mind. One example is you think of kids, we're all taught the fire drills in school, and what is something that can, like a fire drill, you can translate to your work, translate into your studio, or translate even into your home. If you're somebody like me, I don't have a studio, I use my home. So what are some of those skills? Some examples are like your social media, so it doesn't have to be a disaster that happens there. Maybe you have some cash lying around. What does that look like? A space where people can gather safely. Maybe you guys, your family, friends have that one area. No answer is wrong. So please, welcome to drop in the chat, well, the Q&A to help so we can read some out.
We'll give you about a minute and a half, 2 minutes on this.
I just bought my husband because I had one. It's a um, fireproof envelope with all my documents. Um, because heaven forbid I have to go to the Social Security office or back to the DMV and I even have like money, currency, different currencies in it that I keep. I just bought my husband his own. So, and then a smaller one for our baby to be, so we could put his documents in it. I see external hard drive,
Right. Yes, data protection, very critical.
a file organizer with all imported documents is high on the shelf, right?
Smart.
I have a safe that my uncle insisted that I buy where I have put some of my important documents and jewelry. Smart uncle. My mom had one. Actually, I think she still has it. I don't know where it's at. She knows.
One thing that I like about these answers too is that it implies that you've made some decisions about what's important, right? So you've already thought about what are my most important documents? What are my most important digital files? And I'm putting those in a safe place. So it's that idea of prioritizing and just buying, giving yourself a little time to figure out what are the most important things that I need to protect. Great. Great. Okay. Well, thank you all for sharing. I think that's a great segue into our next section, which is really looking at um, how do you take all these concepts and these definitions we've been talking about and start to actually shape them into a plan. And we're going to offer up some ideas here um, that we hope will help to feed your thinking. I have worked with, so just a bit of background, I am not an emergency manager. I come at this from a long time arts career, but have been working with artists and organizations in the 20 years since NCAPER began. So this is all on the job learning. But it's my belief after working and talking with probably hundreds of artists and organizations that a readiness plan is less about the actual physical paper or digital file at the end, although that's important. What is really the valuable part is making these intentional decisions ahead of time about what you're going to do and who will do it in a crisis or in an unexpected situation. And that's why we don't offer up templates or cookie cutters or fill in the blank plans. Because as Annalisa said, a teaching artist is going to have a very different plan than an artist co-op that's going to have a very different plan than a small museum. It's these intentional questions that you ask that we're going to help you pose, and the conversations that your team has and the decisions that you make that are unique to you that result in the most beneficial plan. And again, that readiness can help you prepare for anything unexpected. But one of the best things to do is to mitigate, to identify what are your biggest risks and how do you reduce or eliminate those, because that is going to save you time, money, and hassle in the long run. So when we talk about plans, these concentric circles kind of demonstrate different ways to think about how to build out a plan. At the core is a disaster plan. This is really the first section of your plan that you want to take on because this is all about protecting people and important things and spaces in generally some sort of physical threat. Again, whether that is a fire, a flood, a storm, a pandemic, but it is how are we going to keep our people and our things safe and recover them as quickly as possible. Then we move into, and we will have a class that is specific on disaster planning. Continuity of operations. You might have heard the term COOP plan or business continuity. And this is very much a thing in the commercial sector, but it is where you look at what are my critical business operations that I need to either keep going or restart as quickly as possible. So this might be, for instance, if you are a community art space, your important things in your COOP plan are getting your doors back open so that the community can enter. If you are a museum that is preserving a particular collection, it might be I need to make sure that that protection is salvaged and safe and not subject to further damage or mold. That might be the most important thing before I open back up to the public. So again, it's going to be different for every entity or every practice. Next layer out is the readiness plan, which today's webinar is really meant to kind of orient you to. How do you even think about a readiness plan? And this is again where you are, ready to think about what's my plan B for any portion of my activities. So this includes your people, your facilities, your communications, your finances and legal. It's all of the aspects of your work. These tend to be focused internally, whether you're a solo practitioner or part of a team. These are really about protecting your internal assets and your internal operations. But then the furthest circle out is a resiliency plan. And this often is more externally focused and tends to help you think about, okay, in an environment that is constantly changing, and we know we're all working in very volatile environments now, literally and figuratively, how am I going to adapt over time to all of these changes in the environment? So a resiliency plan, again, tends to look outward at these external forces that are affecting me and my community. And it often involves working with colleagues, working with community, working with the larger sphere. So that's just a snapshot of how these kind of build on one another. But again, probably want to start at the core with disaster plan, physical safety and security, and then build outward. So brass tacks, what is in a readiness plan? You can shape a plan in many ways, and in a couple slides, we're going to share some actual examples with you. But I have found it useful to kind of break the contents of a plan into three buckets. And these are the things that you want to collect and talk with your team about and decide. The buckets being information, instructions, and actions. So you can think about collecting all kinds of information that would be helpful to you in an emergency or an interruption. Things like facts, contacts, how to reach people, assignments. This is who does X, this is who does Y. Where are important things located? What are relevant policies in terms of who has authority, who can make financial decisions, who can call a board meeting, those kinds of things. So that's one bucket is information. A second is instructions. As Annalisa said, in a crisis, you tend to fight, flight, or freeze. And if you freeze, you may not be able to remember even the most simple steps. That's why fire drills are important for kids so that they don't have to think about it. So write down, what are your backup plans? What and how do you do critical actions? What are checklists so you can just quickly work through something? If you, for instance, need to evacuate your space, what are the things you need to tick off to safely shut everything down? And then finally, you want to write down actions. These are the things that we are going to put into place to make ourselves more ready and more resilient. What are schedules? How often are we going to do certain updates, like updating our insurance or doing a safety walkthrough? What are future actions that we can take to improve our readiness? What are some templates that we want to have in place, such as a template press release, so that if there's a crisis, we have it ready to go out and we just have to drop in the salient information. So again, information, instructions, and actions are ways to think about structuring your plan and your conversations. How to use it. Why do you want to go to all this bother? Well, it can serve a couple of different purposes. The first is a formal record. It's a document which demonstrates your readiness. And this can be particularly valuable if you are talking to a stakeholder, a funder, a potential board member. What this does is you're able to demonstrate, hey, you've invested in me, I'm investing in protecting our work, my work. So I have a readiness plan. It is up to date. I am helping to protect your investment. Secondly, it is a reference place. Again, if you forget something, it's just a place that you can pull and immediately get to your information. It can be a helpful training device for new people, whether those are new assistants, new staff members, new volunteers. It's a central place where you can say, hey, this is how we do it. It's a place for compliance. You can check yourself over time. If you've set out some steps for yourself, again, it's great to write it down and then you have that commitment to yourself. Are you going to go back and are you actually adhering to your own commitments? And always remember that as Annalisa said, we don't want you to create a thick binder, 100 pages that sits on the shelf and collects dust. But even if it is a very abbreviated, short, easy to use plan, it can be a tool, but you also have to build in the habits. You have to build in the thinking that this is part of your everyday practice because those habits are going to have more strength than documents do. A couple of other kind of mantras that I believe in terms of readiness planning basics. The first is no guilt. Whatever you have done or haven't done so far, it doesn't matter. Start where you are today. The fact that you are here and taking an hour out of your day to think about this is a great step. And so you just start where you are and build from there. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is expected to be perfect. The third is harvest wisdom. At NCAPER, we work nationally. We have worked with folks all over the country who sadly have had all kinds of crises occur, but they have often come out stronger, come out with lessons learned that they have been willing to share. So we try to offer through the BAARN program as many of those sources and as much of that wisdom as we can so that you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to recreate the wheel. But that said, this is all of this wisdom is to help inform you. It's not for you to copycat. It's not for you to cookie cut. Again, a fill in the blank plan can, or an outdated plan can actually be dangerous because again, it's those decisions. It's deciding this action, if our power goes out, is the best thing for us. That may not be true for someone else. So you want to make your own decisions and not cookie cut. And the fifth kind of rule for readiness planning smarts is redundancy and dissemination. Multiple copies of things, whether that's phone numbers, whether that is job descriptions, whether that's knowledge, and spreading that out. So you want to have, there was a mention about an external hard drive, keeping your files there. That's really smart. You have stuff on your local computer, perhaps in the cloud, but also backed up on an external hard drive that can be safely evacuated if you need to. And spreading information out, making sure that it is in multiple physical places and in multiple people's brains. Again, so that not just one person holds all the information about how to do something, because if suddenly they're out of commission, you need someone else to be able to step in.
Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. This is true, so it's the inverse. Don't make your plan any more complex than it needs to be, as Molly is trying to drive into you guys. Again, the goal is not perfection. The goal is having something practical, visible, and useful when you need it. What content your plan should might have. This is a list, 1 through 18 that you might need. Don't freak out. I know when I first saw this, I was like, oh, it's not part of my plan. Some of these do not pertain to you, and some of these might not be long. And again, it's as much as you need, but no more. It's you see here the first three are general for organizations, not individuals. 5, 6, 7 that are bolded are the first important sections to a disaster plan. So take a look at this. And again, not all of this can pertain to you as an individual. If you're here for thinking about yourself and then your organization, that's two plans right there. Thank you.
So, what does this mean in terms of turning out a plan? What does that plan actually look like? Again, we don't want to offer cookie cutters, but it's certainly great to look at other existing plans just to get a feel for what other organizations have done and what's provided so that you can start thinking about what's going to work for your particular situation. So here are 4 sample plans that are available on our website. The folks who created them have given us permission to share these, but just to give you a sense of some different scale and scope. So this first one is from Will Geer's Theatricum Botanicum. They looked at emergency preparedness and emergency management, that core piece, right, that we talked about, and a business continuity plan. So what are some of their basic functions that they need to get restarted? So this plan is 22 pages in its entirety. Another example is one that I worked on with Dance Cleveland, which is a major professional dance presenter in Cleveland, Ohio, that presents in major venues. And this was a full-blown readiness plan. So it looked at emergency management, but also just continuity and preparedness for the entire scope of their organization. This was a little long, but they work in multiple venues. And it ended up being 51 pages, which is probably the longest that I would recommend a plan B. Thirdly, Streb, some of you may know this dance company out of the Pacific Northwest. And this one is about 20 pages, and it primarily focuses on their physical people, things, and buildings. And lastly, this is one, it's handwritten, and I created this partly in jest, but partly in seriousness, what an individual organization plan might look like. So this is handwritten, not what I would recommend, but just to show an example. And it is 2.5 pages. But it has all of the basic information. These are my emergency contacts. These are the checklists of what I would need to do if I suddenly needed to leave. These are all the codes and keys, and this is how to get to my landlord, and this is how to shut off the water. So again, this just provides you a sense of the range of what a plan can be. And again, I know that this can feel like a lot, but we hope that these examples just give you some kind of a launch pad to think about what will work best for you and what your team is likely to be willing and able to work with. Because again, you want it to be right sized for your situation and something that folks will actually use. Next. So, what are the steps for creating your plan? Again, we're going to go through this graphic, but I just want to again say ahead of time that we will be drilling down into these different steps in future BAARN classes. So, this is just to kind of give you an overall sense of what the process is. So, we have the first phase, which is understand and assess, then plan and protect, and thirdly, implement and sustain. So the first step is really doing the scan, collecting information. What are your critical business functions? What are your critical assets and collections? Often we have found that um, visual arts organizations, libraries, and archives, they tend to think in the mindset of assets and collections. And in the performing arts, we haven't always thought that way, but we indeed have assets and collections, whether those are our business records, music libraries, history, and our kind of legacy. So thinking about what are all of those assets and collections that are worthy of protection, and then thinking about what are our biggest risks and vulnerabilities. So that all kind of falls into the initial inventory and assessment phase. Then you want to engage your team in this conversation about how to plan and protect. So this can involve what risk can you reduce? What are your priorities? Again, you can have 100 different things, but you need to figure out what is going to protect you the best. An example is after Hurricane Harvey in Houston, the Alley Theater was totally flooded. I can't remember how many feet of water, but it was just horrendous. And they had something like 10,000 props. But they had identified a subset of all of those props that were significant because they either were of historical significance or they were used all the time, in many productions. So they already had this list. So they were able, when all of those were water damaged, to pick out the top, 1,000 that were the most important and preserve and salvage those. So thinking about, again, what your priorities are. Also, which of your operations and what can where can you reduce your risk? So that allows you to start to develop your business continuity plan and also to start thinking about archiving. How do you protect your records in such a way that they can be informative, but also protected for future generations? And then lastly, area 3, making decisions. Making decisions with your team about who's going to do what, what's important to protect, how you're going to reduce your risk, and then starting to write those down, documenting those actions, rules, and procedures. This is where your actually plan starts to come into shape. Um, and sharing, training, and running drills, because if someone is named in the plan, they need to know what they are expected to know and be able to do. And then it's all a circle, it's all a cycle. You're going to review, update, and adapt it regularly. And anytime something happens, you want to do a little analysis and figure out, okay, what could we do better? How could we protect ourselves more in the future? So it's kind of this ongoing cycle so that we always end up in a better place after something unexpected occurs.
Thank you, Molly. So, emergency response team, who's responsible for what? You can also call this your chain of command. Here's a list of possibilities, but one of the biggest mistakes people make in an emergency, assuming everything is all figured out. Somebody got it, right? Somebody has this. When everyone is stressed out, confused, again, that fight, flight, freeze, trying to protect your own priorities and trying to figure out what's the most important things and what's falling through the cracks. This is another thing to think about, like thinking about the roles ahead. Who is doing what ahead of time? For larger organizations, these roles may be assigned differently, like a tree. For a lot of organizations I work with, there is like if there's an alarm that goes off, there's like a chain of command, usually whoever lives the closest or who is the top person with the most title. Um, for smaller organization, one it might be just one person that wears all the multiple hats, that facilities director that also does visitor service and also does the events at the same time. That is the person, maybe. And if you were a solo bolo artist, don't stop listening just because you don't have the staff. Um, you're still managing these functions. You're still doing it all yourself. For example, who communicates with funders, clients, audience? If you're a solo bolo artist, if you're alone, you're like, who just says I'm okay, to family members? Who documents damages for insurance or grants purposes? Who's gonna call your landlord? Who figures out what needs to be salvaged first? As Molly highlighted, that theater had their top five props, like identify like the top, like what's the most important thing to prioritize. That list might help you to look back, be like, okay, that drive, that safe, that envelope, and who coordinates logistics and next steps. Again, it could be you doing it yourself, or if you're with a team or organization, think about that. Like who has one piece of this puzzle? With again, a solo practitioner benefits from identifying a trust backup person. So nothing wrong with phoning a friend and leaning on community. That's why we have community for moments like this. We often call this readiness buddy, a little buddy, someone who knows your priority, can step in if you're unavailable or just overwhelmed. I want to use myself as an example. A lot of my art pieces are actually at my friends' houses because I live in San Francisco and I just don't ever know what my space is going to be like. So I have my trusted friends that I count on. They know how important those art pieces are, and they know what to do if somebody else is interested in buying them. They're safe and they have them, and if something happens, if I need them, I know how to get in touch with them, of course. Um, Again, having that buddy, that mutual aid system is really important to identify. Um, and the important thing is knowing who's responsible for what in an emergency. Just knowing that will come a long way in your plan. Templates and tools. So here are a few of them. We will be emailing these slides to you after class, but to share right now, here's a list of resources and tools that exist. So you can just help build your readiness plan. Like Molly said, like there's no cookie cutter, but it's always good to like just see what others look like, what exists. It makes me think of when you build your resume, you kind of shop around different templates. It's like which one I like, which one I like this setup. Who's answering this, or how is this being responsive to it's going to call attention for a job or a grant. Same thing with these templates and tools. They can be really useful in this way where you just need inspiration to build off.
And again, in terms of sharing the wisdom, our colleagues at the Houston Arts Alliance, which has a whole disaster services full-time position, have created these great short videos. They're really easy to absorb on their YouTube channel. that look again at some of these different little snippets of what your plan might include. And these are designed specifically for artists and arts organizations. And lastly, again, don't freak out, but this is a long list of webinars that Performing Arts Readiness Project has created over the years and are now housed on the NCAPER site. And although they were originally designed for organizations and under the umbrella of performing arts, many of them have a lot of things that are relevant to individual artists or smaller organizations. And a lot of this in content transfers very relevantly to other disciplines. So this ranges everything from, again, crisis communications and reputation management to fire safety to working with communities in healing after disaster to workplace violence. So a whole array of free and on-demand webinars. So once you have kind of taken all these steps, looked at all these resources, how do you start putting it together and putting it into action? Here are just a couple of thoughts we hope to leave you with. Again, as you start to have conversations with your team and look at your critical functions, you want to start making these decisions and writing things down. So here's an example of how some of these pieces might actually fit into your final plan. I'd mentioned these three potential buckets: information, instructions, and actions. So as you look at your people in your plan, the information pieces around people might be things like you want to include your org chart. So you know, again, what that tree is that Annalisa mentioned of authority and who can make decisions and who contacts whom. Emergency contact information. Do you know if one of your board members or one of your staff members becomes ill or has an accident? Who is their next of kin or their significant other that you need to contact? Where to find job descriptions. Those don't all need to be in your plan, but it might be great to have a say, okay, this is where on the drive all the job descriptions are. So if so and so suddenly, has an appendicitis and is out for a week, we need to pull their job description and get a temp in. Or how can the board call an emergency meeting? That's something that is in your bylaws. That is a legal requirement. They can't just willy-nilly start making decisions in an emergency. So those are the pieces of information you might think about pulling together. Instructions in your plan might be things like, if I'm an individual performing artist, here's what to do if I'm hurt or I get ill while I'm on tour, because that's something that you might want to be able to share with your partner or significant other, or send that out to your presenters who are hosting you. Where to find temporary staff. And your actions might be, I need to create an emergency response team. I need to make sure that whenever we hire somebody new, that an orientation to this readiness plan is part of their onboarding. Just another example, when you look at facilities, for instance, and what might go into your plan. The information bucket might include how to contact my landlord, where the emergency equipment is located. My instructions might include, how do I turn off the water main if suddenly there's a flood? What's this checklist of if there is an impending storm and I need to close down? What's the checklist of all the things that I do to temporarily close down? Or how do I respond to physical threats? If there is a bomb threat called in, what are the things that the folks who answer the phone need to be able to know how to do? And finally, your actions might include, I'm going to make sure that all of our staff and our ushers go to CPR and first aid training once a year. The Red Cross offers it free. I'm going to get it on the schedule. I'm going to make sure that every quarter we do a walk around inside and outside to do a risk assessment and see if there's any new things around the building that we need to take care of. And again, just some reminders of things to consider as you are thinking through these steps. Assessing your risks and mitigating them. That's always going to save you the most time and money in the long run, is reducing your risks wherever you can observe them. Again, determining your priorities. Which risks are most likely to hit you? I'm based in Atlanta, so I'm going to be more worried about, honestly, flooding and heavy summer storms than I am about earthquakes. Which are my assets that are most important to protect? Which are my operations that absolutely need to try to keep going? Which are the records that if I didn't have copies of, or if I weren't able to access those, like my insurance policies, I would be in deep trouble. Again, thinking about business continuity, how am I going to get those core operations back up and going as smoothly and quickly as possible? You also want to think about what you're going to write down and how you store and share that. Your plan might include some sensitive information, people's contact information, some information about your financial institutions or phone numbers. So you might want to think about, I want to keep this close to my chest, or there might be sections that are only, for instance, shared with senior staff and other sections that would be available, say, to volunteers and ushers. So you want to just think about maintaining this information in a safe way. Think about how you're going to update this and how you incorporate new peoples or spaces or things. Are you going to revisit your plan twice a year and make sure that if you are working in a new space or you've got a new vendor, you want to make sure that they get folded in? And pick the low-hanging fruit first. I have to imagine that a lot of what we've said today is maybe not news to you. We're hoping that a lot of this is about, oh, I do have that information. I am taking those steps. We just need to think about that through the lens of readiness, or I just need to kind of centralize that information. So pick the low-hanging and easy fruit first. And again, in all of this, we encourage you to pick out what is applicable and useful to you. We are laying out a lot of information and ideas for you to pick and choose what is useful, and you can disregard what's not. So lastly, again, just a quick reflection on using it and who uses it. You have your information, your instructions, your actions, and make sure that you are using your emergency response team. If you are, again, a solo artist, you want to think about that readiness buddy. It might be another artist who works close to you, maybe someone who works in the same discipline as you, so they kind of understand the way that you work. That could also be volunteers or board members. And you want to make sure that this is part of your regular operations. This is not something that lives outside. This is not something you just think about once a year. This is something that we hope becomes part of your day-to-day thinking and way of operating. And what happens when it's done? Spoiler alert, it's never done. This is something that you're always working on, always improving. It's never perfect, and that's fine. One step at a time. Again, think about how you're going to distribute it in safe ways, who you might want to share it with. I do know some organizations that do like a one pager or a summary of their plan that doesn't have any sensitive information in it, but is something that you could attach to a grant application, as Annalisa said, or share with a potential funder as a demonstration that you have a readiness plan, but you don't need to kind of share all the dirty laundry and the confidential information with them. A couple of thoughts about embedding this within your organization, because again, we know how busy you are, we know how many hats you wear. What are some ways that you can make this easy on yourself and build it into what you're already doing? So internally, again, pick the low-hanging fruit, do the basics now. Start to pull together, your inventory of your assets. If you have a capital assets inventory, know where your emergency equipment is and how it's maintained and what those plans are. Pull together your contact list, write down your data backup protocols, kind of do all those basics now. Think about, again, what you know or already have that will serve you in an emergency. Do you have an emergency fund? You should. How do you access that, or what are your kind of guardrails around accessing that? And finally, this should all align with your existing values. All of your decisions should be framed in the work that you are already doing. So if you are an artist and your purpose is about connecting and teaching, then your plan and your values are going to those are going to inform your plan. If you are an organization that your mission and values are around protecting and preserving the canon, then that's going to be your plan is going to be different because that's going to be the focus. And that is as it should be. And lastly, thinking about embedding this in your connections with community. We know that those who are connected to community and are relevant thrive in crisis. We know this through research that if you have a network, you are, whether it's a professional or personal or social network, you're more likely to survive and thrive a crisis. I think we all saw this in real life during COVID. The organizations that kind of hunkered down and just were looking at protecting themselves didn't do that well. It was the ones who went outward, extended a hand, and were relevant and responsive to their community. Those are the ones that survived and thrived. So think about, once you kind of started taking your protections inward, think about looking outward and how you might be part of the readiness for your entire community. And there are networks out there. One of our next big phases with BAARN is to begin developing and training response networks so that there is that structure where you can turn to someone and know that they're going to have your back and you will have theirs. So this project will begin to explore networks, both existing ones and ones that we might help you to create in the 10 county region that BARN is serving. And lastly, again, trying to find ways to make this sticky and part of your everyday work. Use your existing opportunities and activities to incorporate this. If you are updating your tour contract, if you are doing your studio housekeeping, every quarter, use that as a chance to look around for risk assessment. Anytime you're doing annual check-ins or updates, use those as an opportunity to also think about your plan. Build readiness planning into your budgets and your budgeting process. Do you need to think about some cash reserves? Do you want to say, I'm going to put 5% of my budget every year, and direct that toward an emergency fund? Or, we need to get some emergency equipment in here. Think about building it into job descriptions and job reviews, because if something gets measured, it'll get done. And it shouldn't be you alone. If you work in any kind of a team, there should be some shared responsibility for some of this work. Again, incorporating into existing activities. If you do a staff retreat, if you do board meetings, I was at an organization and we had a monthly staff meeting, and every month we had a readiness tip of the month. And it was just something easy, but it was 12 times a year. Everybody did something. And so at the end of the year, we were in a better place. And finally, again, do your scheduled drills, tabletops. These can be fun. It doesn't all have to be dark. You can make these kind of entertaining and engage everybody in the work. And with that, I think we want to open it up to any discussion or questions that you might have that you can drop into the Q&A.
We'll take comments too.
Well, the Q&A will stay open, but we'll just kind of share a couple of next steps with you. We want to thank you all for being here. Annalisa?
Yeah, I want to highlight that there's a class coming up, our risk assessment. It's on Tuesday, June 23rd, 1 to 2:30 Pacific time. It will also be online. This is part of the basic enhancement basic track. Learn how to identify potential risks, evaluate vulnerabilities, and take proactive steps to reduce hazard before it happens. Again, you could go to our website and register, just like the way you registered to us today. Um, it will be through Zoom, and contact us.
Well, I see something in the Q&A. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And yes, please feel free to share these resources, recordings, links with your friends and colleagues. This is very much a word of mouth kind of project. We recognize that, and is one reason that having Annalisa there in San Francisco is important. But you all, by being here, are part of our network, and so we appreciate your being here and sharing this information with peers and colleagues.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day and stay safe, and we'll see you soon.